Thank you. Another couple of housekeeping is just if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We also ask that you add your email or contact information and with your questions, just in case we're not able to get to it and we can follow up with you. We also wanted to let you guys know that we will save some time toward the end. And if we're not able to get to all of those questions, we will save those for the end. We'll follow up with the recording. The recording will be shared with all of the individuals who registered for the presentation today, and you will get that via email. Next, thank you. Okay, I'll give the slides a couple of second to load, but here's an overview of the presentation for today. We're going to go a little bit over the context of what is the NPRM, and then we'll give you an analysis of the proposed rule. We'll also give you a litigation update to the 2019 Trump rule. We'll go over the strategy and the timeline, and we'll also give you a glimpse into the national strategy. And of course, we'll go over next steps and the messaging that you can share with your community members. I already shared this, but we will save some time at the end for Q&A. All right, so now I'm going to let my fellow PIF Illinois executive team members introduce themselves. I'll just go ahead and get started. My name's Edith Avila Olea. I'm the policy manager here at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, also known as ICER. And I will turn it over to Fred.
Okay, thanks, Edith. I'm Fred Sau. I'm the Senior Policy Counsel at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrants and Refugee Rights, working with Edith. And next up on the list is Sarah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sara Cartagena. I'm the Senior Immigration Analyst at the Latino Policy Forum. And I'll pass it on to Melitza.
Hi, everyone. I am Melitza Pagan. I'm an attorney at the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, and I'll pass it on to Lulia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lulia Quiñones. I'm Senior Director of Health Policy at ICER, and I'll pass it over to Andrea.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Kovac from the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, and I'm an attorney on our health justice team.
Thank you all. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Fred, who's going to give us the context overview of where we're at.
Okay, thanks again, Edith, and hello again, everyone. I'm glad you're all spending about an hour on a very sunny, Wednesday afternoon here with us, learning a bit more about what's happening with public charge. So if you could go on to the next slide, I think everybody knows by now that the previous rule put in place by the previous administration is no more. The Biden administration, got rid of that old rule back in almost exactly a year ago. And in its place, Homeland Security has issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. That's the ANPRM. So this came out in August of last year. It is a first very preliminary step to issuing a new full-blown regulation regarding what public charge means and how it's going to be, determined. So that was back in August of last year. PIF Illinois submitted comments, as did quite a number of other organizations. I know many of your organizations joined on to a sign-on, providing input to Homeland Security. I should have added that this ANPRM just basically asked a bunch of questions regarding, how Homeland Security, how the Biden administration should handle public charge, and taking into account a number of different factors that come into play with public charge. So after the comment period ended in late October of last year, Homeland Security took everything back, reviewed the comments. And, just a few weeks ago, Homeland Security undertook step 2, which is issuing this new notice, the NPRM, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. This came out February 24th. And, with this publication in the Federal Register, we now have a 60-day period to submit, to review the proposed rule and to submit comments and raise concerns, any concerns that we may have with the proposed rule. So the deadline for comments, when the comment period closes, is Monday, April 25th. So again, we have just under 2 months to get comments in. Now, after April 25th, Homeland Security will go through a very similar process of reviewing the comments that it receives, doing some more thinking, doing some drafting, and then sometime soon after that, Homeland Security will then issue a final rule. That will actually be, the law of the land so far as what counts for public charge and how Homeland Security is going to handle it. So it is very likely that Homeland Security will provide a grace period, upon publication, and set an effective date for the final rule sometime after the publication of the final rule. Usually that's 60 days. It might be sooner, it might be later, but basically it gives folks a chance to learn about the new rule, to get used to it, adjust any practices and conduct education, which I'm sure we will be doing once that happens. Until that date, though, there is no regulation regarding public charge. So what we have now is a guidance from 1999 that is still in effect. And again, we're still in the process of determining what the next rule should be. So with that, and to explain the proposed rule, let me hand this off to Andrea.
Thank you so much, Fred. So let's get right into it. Next slide, please. So the definition that has been proposed in the Biden administration's proposed rule generally mirrors the 1999 field guidance that, as Fred said, has been in effect. Likely at any time to become a public charge is likely at any time to become primarily dependent on the government for subsistence, as demonstrated by either the receipt of public cash assistance for income maintenance or long-term institutionalization at government expense. And we are going to spend the next few slides parsing through a lot of these words. Next slide, please. So first, what does the proposed rule mean for public cash assistance for income maintenance? So you'll see on the left-hand side of the slide that in the proposed rule, it specifically calls out which public programs this would include. So it includes Supplemental Security Income, SSI, TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and state and local cash assistance for income maintenance, which might be better known as general assistance. So this includes ongoing public funds intended to pay basic living expenses. So it has to be ongoing, not a one-time fund. It has to be a fund from the public versus a private fund that's intended to pay for basic living expenses. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you will see some of the cash-like programs or cash programs that are not penalized in the proposed rule. And we haven't listed all of them. We just listed some that we thought you would have questions about. In the appendix, there is a much longer list of excluded benefits, but we wanted to make sure to call out these on the right-hand side. So the proposed rule does not penalize child care assistance or energy assistance, so that would be LIHEAP, for instance. It does not penalize disaster relief or Stafford Act or stimulus checks or pandemic assistance. It does not penalize earned income. So the most common examples are Social Security benefits or government pension benefits, unemployment benefits, tax credits, tax deductions, and Social Security disability income or SSDI. Those are not penalized. The three main programs that are considered public cash assistance for income maintenance in the proposed rule are the ones listed on the left. Next slide, please. So how does the proposed rule define long-term institutionalization at government expense? So the most basic general example of this is nursing home facility-based care that is paid for by Medicaid. The proposed rule really took pains to call out that what they are trying to exclude here are uninterrupted extended periods of stay in a facility. It could be a long-term care facility, a mental health facility, but again, it has to be paid for by the government and it has to be for an extended period of stay. So on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, you'll see what programs are not penalized or are excluded in this proposed rule. Home and community-based services are excluded. The proposed rule spent a lot of time talking about the public policy reasons why they wanted to exclude home and community-based services. Short-term rehabilitative care is also excluded. And in fact, the rule said that sporadic stays in an institution where the person was discharged after each stay would be excluded. And it was in order to contrast that what they're really looking to penalize are those uninterrupted extended periods of stay. And then just enrollment in Medicaid in general is not penalized. So any other Medicaid benefits are not penalized. Again, in the proposed rule, they are seeking to exclude just when that Medicaid is paying for an extended period of stay in a nursing home or facility-based care. Next slide, please. So I said we were going to parse out that first slide. Here we go. So it used the word receipt. So what does receipt of public benefits means? Receipt means that an individual has to be listed as the beneficiary of that benefit program, and they have to, DHS or the immigration agency will only be looking at current or past receipt of those benefits that we just talked about. So it's helpful to think about what doesn't count as receipt. So an application for benefit on one's own behalf or on behalf of another. So applications do not count as receipt. Approval for future receipt on one's own behalf or behalf of another does not count as receipt. And it does not count as receipt when solely on behalf of another, even if assists with an application. So let's go to the next slide to make this a little bit more concrete. So here I have an example. So let's say we have Rosa, she's a mom, and she is a green card applicant who, when she applies for her green card, she's going to be subject to the public charge test for our example. So let's say Rosa has a U.S. citizen child, and Rosa is going to go ahead and fill out that application for SSI for her U.S. citizen child. Under the proposed rule, the SSI will not count against Rosa in a public charge test. Rosa is applying for a benefit, SSI, on behalf of another, her U.S. citizen child. Rosa is not the beneficiary of this program. So I did want to note that this is a departure from the 1999 public charge guidance. DHS stated in its proposed rule that it took this step to mitigate the significant chilling effects from the 2019 rule. Next slide, please. The totality of the circumstances test. So this will sound familiar to all of you who have been on a previous public charge presentation. So the Department of Homeland Security's immigration officials must consider, at a minimum, all the factors that are listed in the statute. So that is age, health, family status, assets, resources, and financial status, education and skills, and the affidavit of support. These are all of the factors that they must consider. The Department of Homeland Security is going to treat a sufficient affidavit of support favorably. What does that mean? In the rule, it means a positive factor that makes an applicant less likely at any time to become a public charge in the totality of the circumstances. They do say in the proposed rule that a sufficient affidavit of support does not alone result in the finding that the applicant is not likely at any time to become a public charge. So just having a sufficient affidavit of support isn't going to automatically make you not a public charge, but it is going to be treated favorably according to the proposed rule. No one factor other than the lack of an affidavit of support when it is required can determine whether an individual is likely to become a public charge. So really, again, immigration officials are looking at the totality of the circumstances of the green card applicant's life. So unlike the 2019 Trump final public charge rule, there isn't that positive and negative weight system. There's no evidence relevant for each factor. None of that is listed in the proposed rule under the Biden administration. In the proposed rule, they also state that current and or past receipts of benefits on its own is insufficient. So what immigration officials will do is they're going to assess the amount of the benefit, the duration, so how long the green card applicant used that benefit, and how recent that receipt of benefit is. But that even that current or past receipt of the benefit on its own, is insufficient for a finding of public charge. And also a finding of disability is also insufficient to find somebody a public charge. So someone can't be found a public charge just because they have a disability. The immigration officials have to assess all of the factors that are listed in the first bullet. That was a lot on one slide. Next slide, please. So in the totality of the circumstances test that every immigration official will be doing for someone who's subject to the test, because there's not that weighting system, the positive and negative weighting system, the Department of Homeland Security in the proposed rule says we may issue guidance, so even more information about these totality of the circumstances factors, to immigration officials. So there might even be more guidance later on to inform their assessments. But right now in the proposed rule, there's not any more information than that. It also states in the proposed rule that if an immigration official does deny someone admissibility based on the public charge ground, that immigration official must reflect consideration of each of those totality of the circumstances factors and articulate the reason for the determination. So they really, this is a way, according to the proposed rule, to ensure that any denial based on public charge grounds is made on a case-by-case basis in light of all the factors. They want to make sure that immigration officials assessed all of those factors. Next slide, please. So the next 3 slides I'm not going to go into in detail. but we want you to have them because it's really important for you to know not only who's subject to the public charge test, but who is not subject to the public charge test. So we've listed on the next 3 slides all of the exempt groups, meaning that they are exempt from the public charge test. And if you could just go through each slide. Next slide. So before I turn it over to Melitza, I realize that we gave you the proposed public charge rule at a much higher, a very high level. For any of your organizations that want a deeper dive into public charge, any of the people that are speaking here today can do that, and we'll have information at the end of the presentation of how you can contact Protecting the PIF Illinois campaign in order to request a longer, deeper dive into the proposed rule or public charge overall. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melitza.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. So I'm going to do just a really quick sort of recap of what is currently happening as it relates to the litigation on the 2019 Trump rule. So if we could go to the next slide. So you might have heard that there's still some litigation lingering from the 2019 public charge rule. I do want to reiterate that the 2019 public charge rule is no longer in effect as of March of last year. And so we continue to tell families that that rule no longer is in effect, and that it is important for families to know that they can continue to use most healthcare and social service programs for which they qualify with no immigration consequences. Right. The proposed rule that we are talking about today is the Biden administration's step to ensure that there is a new final rule that essentially just replaces the 2019 public charge rule. And that is what we're talking about today. So to let folks know, there are 2 cases that have been brought by Republican attorney generals to try to reopen the litigation on the Trump 2019 public charge rule. Those cases had originally been closed because the Biden administration dismissed its appeals of the decisions that were made against the 2019 public charge rule. And so just for folks to know, there are still 2 cases, unfortunately, lingering on there. One is before the Supreme Court and the other is before the 7th Circuit Appeals Court. The case in the 7th Circuit is the case brought on by ICER, as well as Cook County, where the Shriver Center, Legal Counsel for Health Justice, and Sidley are representing ICER in the case. We do want to stress, though, that what is currently happening in terms of litigation are really about procedural issues and do not involve the question of whether to reinstate the 2019 rule. The questions before the court are about whether or not the Republican attorney generals and the states they represent are able to intervene in the case and essentially try to reopen the cases. And so right now, again, we stress this is not what is happening at the court right now is not about whether or not to reinstate the 2019 rule. The 2019 rule is not in effect. And so, it's important for families to understand that. And again, we urge everybody to continue to use, healthcare and social service programs for which they qualify. Just the best case scenario is that the courts decide to put an end to this intervention attempt by the Republican AGs. And at worst, what happens is that the cases get back to the lower courts and more stuff happens in the courts, which will take time to sort out for several months. And so again, just stressing that the 2019 rule is not whether or not the 2019 will be reinstated is not what is before the courts right now. And again, reminding folks to tell families and let families know that they can continue to use most healthcare and social service programs for which they qualify with no immigration consequences. Next slide, please. And I will pass it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Melitza. And now we move on to the fun part. How can you engage in this process? So first, we're going to quickly review the PIF Illinois comment strategy that we have. And so as was mentioned, the comment period is 60 days. So all comments will be due April 25th. And the most important thing to note is that this public comment period and the strategy around it is really different from the comment strategy that was in place for the Trump administration proposed public charge rule a few years ago. A few years ago, it was about volume and really getting a lot of comments from organizations, individuals, agencies about their concerns with that proposed rule in order to partly to slow down that rule becoming finalized. This time with this Biden administration public charge proposed rule, the tactics are different. This is more about making sure that this rule is finalized in a timely way. And so the strategy to do that is encouraging high quality comments from organizations that are able to do so, but also PIF Illinois will be doing a sign-on letter, similar to the one that we did back in August last year for the ANPRM. And so for that sign-on letter, it will be for organizations specifically. And we will also be having a template comment that will be crafted from the PIF Illinois Exec Committee, probably using the template comments that PIF National will recreate, but making them within the context of Illinois. And then the final thing to note is that we will be doing a webinar in early April to discuss exactly what is going to be included in this PIF Illinois sign-on letter so that organizations can kind of choose if that's something that they would like to sign on. And we'll also be sharing those template comments as well. So as I mentioned, the timeline for this, we are hoping to get the template comment for organizations sometime around the second week of April, as well as that sign-on letter. And so as mentioned, it will be a few pages and will be similar in style to the ANPRM sign-on comment letter. And the big thing that we really want to stress for this time around is to really have your organizational networks participate in this process. So really having you guys share the PIF Illinois sign-on comment with partner organizations who you think would be interested in signing on to this. We have a goal set right now for 100. It'd be amazing to get 200 organizations to sign on to the PIF Illinois sign-on comment. We have some suggestions on how you can engage your organization network by following up, sending reminders. If you have meetings with networks, just plugging them in. And then as always, if you would like the PIF Illinois Exec Committee to do a presentation similar to this, or to go more in depth on the public charge, as Andrea mentioned, for your network or for other partner organizations, we are always more than happy to do that. And you can request that by emailing pifillinois@povertylaw.org. And then the PIF National comment strategy is also pretty similar. They are also encouraging those high quality comments. They are doing template comments, as I mentioned, and those will be going out the first week of April. They're also doing a sign-on comment for organizations. And I do want to note that organizations are more than welcome to sign on to both. They can sign on to the PIF Illinois sign-on letter as well as the PIF National sign-on letter. And then one additional item that PIF National is doing is that they are doing a petition for individuals to sign on. So that's essentially a sign-on letter that individuals can do. And they will also be submitting that as a comment. And they will be translating it into multiple languages. So those that speak different languages can participate. And with that, I will pass it on to Luvia to talk about key milestones and messaging.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So we know, as Andrea and others have said, this is a lot of information, but we want to make sure that each of you, especially those that are dealing, working, etc., serving immigrants and their family, are really clear on what you should be telling them right now. Next slide. So right now, some of the things that you could know is that, as Sarah mentioned, there will be a PIF Illinois webinar in early April. Then there is going to be the sign-on comments as well as the template comments coming up in the second week of April. And the 2 weeks prior to the deadline, making sure that we get as many organizations signed on here, not only each of you, but hopefully many others as well. And you will be getting continuous updates via email, but you're always welcome to reach out to any of us through the PIF Illinois email that you could see right now on your screen with any questions, as well as any type of TA, technical assistance or trainings or anything like that. Next slide. So here are some of the key messages. First of all, making sure that you tell people that the Biden NPRM is a key step forward for the final public charge rule. For people to be clear that everything that we were fighting for a few years ago no longer exists, that therefore Medicaid and other things do not affect them. And if you are hearing this for the first time, feel free to follow up with us in case there is a need for clarification between what you're hearing in the community, because we know that people still think that Medicaid, SNAP, and other benefits may affect them, which is incorrect. Another message is DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, must make improvements from the 2019 final rule. What we mean by that is that even though the Biden NPRM is obviously better than the previous public charge rule under Trump, there's still a lot of things that we could fix, and there's still a lot of things that we could collectively work on. And most importantly is that each of us has a role, and each of us could raise our voice and make sure that we're being heard. And until the Biden public charge rule is final and effective, what we currently have, which is the 1999 guidance, is still in effect. Next slide. Now we're going to open it up to questions. I know that there was a question and Andrew already answered it in the chat, but if anyone else has a question, if either you want to put it in the chat or get off of mute, you're welcome to do so. And don't be shy, even if it's a clarifying point. We know that there was a lot thrown at you. So happy to also answer clarifying questions. And as you heard earlier, this information on the presentation will be emailed out if you registered. So you're always welcome to review it and ask follow-up questions as well. So again, we have plenty of time in case there's any questions.
And if you don't have a question, but you actually would like to say what you would like to see in the final rule, maybe you were hoping for something different in the proposed rule and you see something that disappoints you. You know, we're interested in what you would like to see in a final rule too, because when we do put together our template comments and our sign-on letter, we want it to reflect what you all want to see in a final public charge rule.
Thank you, Andrea. Can one of my colleagues answer the question? Jose Torres is asking, can you clarify the difference between SSI and SSDI?
I can look for that in the proposed rule to make sure I have it correctly. So if there's another question.
There is, I think yeah. I know the answer, but I want to double check just because I've been a little out of this. So Kimberly is asking, this is not related to the NPRM, but just public charge. I noticed on the exemption slides that VAWA self-petitioners are exempt from public charge analysis. Does this apply at the point they adjust status? I think the answer is they're exempt, but again, don't want to double check.
Yes.
Thank you, Fred. And then if somebody else, I know I've been a part of some of the conversations internally as executive committee. Amber's asking if we could share a little bit of some of the changes we are planning to propose.
I don't think we're quite at the point where we've come to consensus on what changes we'd like to see proposed. I think that will be more the second webinar.
Thank you, Andrea. But again, as Andrea mentioned a few minutes ago, in this case, Amber, to your question, if you or anyone else on here does have suggestions, please reach out because we definitely welcome them.
Yeah, I think one issue that we did flag is that under this proposed rule, state and local cash benefits would still count. And, we're kind of questioning whether that should still be the case. There's also some lack of clarity, particularly as cities like Chicago roll out universal basic income programs. So is that going to count? I think we would argue that it shouldn't, but it's something that needs to be clarified in the final rule.
There's definitely room for improvement in many areas. Another area that we still need to discuss is seeking to just exclude long-term care institutionalization just across the board, because right now, as I said, enrollment in Medicaid is not penalized, but if you use Medicaid for this one particular benefit to pay for long-term care in a facility, then it is penalized. And so there is a strong argument to be made, I think, that that will just further confuse people and it will further contribute to the chilling effect. So I did want to come back to, I think it was Jose's question. So Supplemental Security Income, SSI, provides monthly income payments intended to help ensure that aged, blind, or disabled persons with limited income and resources have a minimum level of income. So it's administered by the U.S. Social Security Administration. And then what constitutes a qualifying state or local cash benefit other than TANF? Okay, so that would be general assistance for the other question. A typical state or local cash benefit for income maintenance is general assistance.
And thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Sorry for also adding a little bit more.
Yeah, just to add to what Michelle wrote, SSDI, Social Security Disability, and as well as old age benefits are paid out from the Social Security Trust Fund that we all pay into through payroll deductions, whereas SSI is paid for through general revenue or appropriations.
Olivia, or actually Sarah, do you want to go to the next slides in the appendix? Because we hesitate to create slides that show all the excluded programs because it's always, not going to capture every program that's excluded. It's just easier to think of it as the programs that are included, the ones that we've already mentioned, and then everything else is excluded. But we did try to put in 2 slides all the programs that we thought people would ask about, and we even have some fact sheets. If anywhere you see the bold underlined is actually linked to a fact sheet on that particular benefit or program and public charge. Of course, the fact sheet is based on the 99 guidance, but all the fact sheets will be updated later when we have a final rule. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see all the cash and cash-like programs that are excluded. Oh, that 1999 was a typo. That's my typo. Sorry about that. These are all excluded from the Biden's NPRM.
Thank you, Andrea. Were there any other comments or questions? We don't want to keep people, but oh. Sorry, it's a little bit long, so let me read it. Yes, I'm assuming that both this presentation as well as the recording will be emailed out, or are we going to post it on our PIF Illinois website?
We can do both. So we'll send it out to everybody who registered along with the slides, and then it will also be posted on our website. That I think we have it on this.
Great. And then so there's our website, Protecting Immigrant Families Illinois. And then in regards to your other question about becoming a partner, if you could email at this email address and just go ahead and write the name of your organization, and one of us will follow up to explain the process, as well as explain to you kind of like the meetings, expectations, requirements, etc. I think I answered all of your questions, Jacqueline. Are there any questions? Great. Any other comments or questions? We don't want to keep you until 4 and give you back the 14 minutes. If you hope so, if you're like me that have not gotten a chance to go outside, at least enjoy a few minutes. But we also don't want to rush any questions if people do have them. Well, seems like there's no other questions. Again, feel free to reach out to us. You have the email address here as well as our website. I would say give us at least a few days to post all this information on the website, as well as email it out. But in the meantime, anything that comes up that you may think about, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'll be happy to answer it. And if one of us doesn't have the answer, then we'll just refer you to somebody else. But thank you again for your time, as well as for your interest and your commitment to working with us. Have a great day.